The Starforge had no name in any one language. Some called it the heart of industry, others the machine god's spine. But across the galaxy, every civilization depended on it. It floated in eternal orbit around a dying blue star, a massive structure built before history, forged from materials no one could replicate. It was ancient, self-sustaining, and completely automated. For over 5,000 years, it never faltered. It constructed megaships, processed planetary-scale resources, and delivered relief supplies to worlds recovering from war or collapse. Then, without warning, it stopped. No flicker, no fade, just silence. Cargo shipments vanished. Sectors went dark. Trade stations received no resupply. The Forge's usual pulse, an energy signature as constant as a heartbeat, flatlined. The first week, most believed it was temporary. A maintenance cycle, perhaps. A minor systems reset. Fleets were dispatched. Scouts, engineers, diplomats. None returned. By the third week, panic set in. Without the Forge, entire systems began to unravel. Food shortages gripped the rim colonies. Terraforming halted in the Maelstrom cluster. Medical synthetics ran dry in a dozen hospitals orbiting Theros V. Worse, planetary defense grids, reliant on Forge-manufactured replacement parts, began to fail. And the Forge remained dark. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from over 100 species gathered in the Coralite Spire, an artificial moon orbiting neutral space. Arguments erupted like solar flares. The Forge is under attack, the Threneri shouted, their crystalline limbs clinking like glass. No, it's infected with code rot, barked the Zareki Prime. The humans built it. Let them fix it, hissed the Veleri ambassador. Humans? Someone scoffed. They left the core centuries ago. Scattered. Feral. But in the chaos, someone, an archivist from the academic fringe, spoke a single phrase that silenced the room. Send the Maker. Confused murmurs followed, until a projection flickered to life in the chamber. An old, grainy blueprint of the Forge's foundation, marked with strange hand-drawn notes. And at the bottom, a symbol long lost to time. A silver wrench crossed with a lightning bolt, a human symbol. The Forge wasn't just a machine. It was a collaboration built by the first great galactic alliance, but only one species had physically walked its halls during construction. Only one species had written instructions by hand. Only one species had left behind tools instead of code. The failsafe wasn't a key, it was a person. The counselors stared at each other, deeply aware of what they were about to suggest. Most humans were gone now. Drifters, mercenaries, colonists in unregistered sectors. Some thought them extinct. But if there was even one left, the Forge might respond. And if it didn't, the stars would keep dying, one by one, in the cold silence that followed. The Coralite Spire had seen its share of arguments, but never like this. 12 hours had passed since the revelation of the human blueprint. The council chamber reeked of anxiety, shifting pheromones, humming vocal cords, and the acrid scent of molten alloy from a cracked coolant pipe no one had bothered to fix. "Let me be clear," said Councillor Veskar of the Rilithi, his voice a guttural growl run through a vocoder. "You're suggesting we entrust the most critical machine in the galaxy to a human." A ripple of discomfort passed through the assembly. "They are extinct," said the Thailand delegate, whose translucent skin pulsed with pink light. Skepticism. Or might as well be. Their species fragmented after the Sol Exodus. Their records are incomplete. Their minds, chaotic. Exactly why they built it, muttered a voice from the back. Heads turned. It was Archivist Nilos, a minor functionary from the Department of Pre-Synthetic Cultures, small, amphibian, and nearly always ignored. He stepped forward, holding an ancient datapad with trembling hands. The humans designed systems that no logic engine could interpret, redundancies built by intuition, nonlinear structures. They didn't follow patterns. They broke them, reassembled them, and made something new. The forge was partly theirs. They were the only ones who walked inside its walls during construction. Counselor Veskar folded his arms. Even if you're right, where would we find one? We've no registry, no contacts, no colonies under their governance. I've got something, said Nellos, his voice steadier now. There's a name that keeps popping up in salvage records. John Reyes. He shows up in incident logs, ship repairs, even an old rebellion skirmish. He doesn't use network tools. He fixes things by hand. Counselor Risa, representing the Telari Collective, narrowed her eyes. What's his rank? He has none. Credentials. None official. Affiliation. Drinks alone, repairs things for barter, lives on a junk moon. No affiliation. Unacceptable. Veskar spat. We need a military-grade solution, not a wandering primitive with a wrench. But no one responded, because deep down, they all felt the same flicker of truth. Every fleet sent into the forge had vanished. Every brilliant technologist had failed. And the forge had spoken. Send the maker. A vote was called. It barely passed. 10 abstentions, 1 vocal protest, and 32 reluctant ayes. A diplomatic shuttle was dispatched within the hour, bound for the outer edges of charted space, coordinates locked on a place known only in smugglers' maps. Keros 9, a junk moon orbiting a dead gas giant. The envoy's mission was simple. Find John Reyes, convince him to enter the forge, and pray that a man with no titles, no cybernetic implants, and no formal training could do what entire civilizations had failed to accomplish. Fix the unfixable. John Reyes had seen better days. The shuttle arrived on Keros 9, just as a low-lying storm kicked up, a violent swirling mix of electrical winds and neon dust. The junk moon was a barren, fractured place where old tech and wreckage floated in the void like the bones of a long-dead fleet. Ships that had seen better days, like Rise, could be found here, scavenging for parts, drifting aimlessly from job to job. John was no different. He sat on a rusted crate in front of a decaying starship carcass, hunched over a plasma welder as sparks flew. His hands, calloused from years of tinkering, worked methodically, unbothered by the mess around him. His cargo pants were stained with oil and grease, and his shirt clung to his back, sweat soaking through the fabric. His unkempt beard scratched at his neck, and his brown eyes had the tired but determined look of someone who'd seen it all and had no intention of slowing down. The shuttle landed with a loud thud, its landing gear sinking into the moon's dust. John didn't look up. His focus remained on the weld he was finishing, the soft hum of the ship's failing engines the only sound in the air. The hatch opened with a hiss. John Reyes. A voice called out from behind him. John didn't flinch. He didn't even pause his work. Depends on who's asking. A tall figure in a sharply cut suit emerged from the shuttle, his appearance as out of place as a diamond in a scrapyard. His skin was pale, almost ghostly, and his accent was crisp, polished, clearly not from around here. I'm Ambassador Zero of the Galactic Council, the man said, his tone all business. We need your help. John paused, finally turning around, the familiar weight of his wrench in his hand. His brow furrowed as he eyed the ambassador. Aha. And what exactly do you need me for? I'm not exactly in the business of diplomatic negotiations. Zero cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable under John's gaze. It's not diplomacy, Mr. Reyes. We need you to fix something. Something critical. John raised an eyebrow. Fix. I've fixed a lot of things, but I don't fix problems I don't understand, and I sure don't go off saving worlds. The ambassador took a step forward, eyes narrowing. This isn't just about one world. This is about saving all of them. The Starforge has gone offline. The galaxy's supply lines are collapsing. We've tried everything, but we need someone who can think differently. John's gaze softened for a moment, and for the first time, he gave the ambassador his full attention. The mention of the Starforge made something stir deep inside him, an old memory he hadn't thought about in years. He set the wrench down, wiping his hands on a rag. "You're telling me the forge stopped working?" Zorro nodded, sensing the change in John's demeanor. "Yes, and we need someone who knows how to fix things by hand. Someone who doesn't rely on fancy systems, just basic ingenuity." John chuckled, shaking his head. "You really have no idea what you're asking for, do you?" Zorro stepped forward, more urgent now. "Mr. Rice, we don't have time for games. The galaxy is falling apart. If you don't help us, billions will die." John looked up at the shuttle, a moment of silence passing between them. He turned back to the wreckage of the ship, picked up his wrench and sighed. "All right, I'll take a look, but I don't make any promises. Now you're going to have to show me what's left of your precious forge." Zorro's face lit up with relief. "Thank you. You won't regret this." John snorted as he climbed into the shuttle. "I've regretted less, trust me. But we'll see." As the shuttle lifted off, John's hands tightened around the worn handle of his wrench. He wasn't sure what he was walking into, but one thing was clear. The galaxy was about to find out exactly what a human with a wrench could do. The shuttle dropped out of the jump gate and glided into the shadow of the forge. It was vast, monumental, a structure so ancient, so massive, that it dwarfed everything around it. John had seen ships the size of small moons, but this was something else. The Starforge loomed like a city-sized titan, a fusion of twisted metal, towering spires, and thick, interconnected pipes that hummed with barely contained energy. John stood at the window, his face lit by the cold, pale glow of the forge's core. He ran a hand through his hair, still wearing the same smirk as when he'd agreed to board the shuttle. But inside, something else stirred, something old, familiar. This was his kind of place, a place that demanded hands-on work, not code, not quantum algorithms, just muscle, ingenuity, and whatever was left in his toolkit. The shuttle docked with a hiss, the airlock sealing behind them. Zorro led the way, his posture stiff as he moved down the corridor, clearly out of his element in this place of metal and machinery. John followed, scanning the walls, his mind already mapping out the path he'd need to take. "This way," Zorro said, pushing open a heavy door that led into the forge's inner sanctum. "This is where it all begins." John stepped inside and immediately felt the difference. The hum of the forge was deafening, a deep, resonant vibration that rattled his bones. It was as though the entire structure was alive, pulsing with energy. A sea of machinery stretched out before him, an endless network of tubes, cables, and control panels. But none of it was working. The screens flickered with static, lights sputtered, and strange smells. Burnt metal and ozone filled the air. Whatever had gone wrong, it wasn't just a malfunction. It was as if the forge had decided, all on its own, that it wasn't going to play nice anymore. John took a deep breath. "So what's the problem? Where's the shutdown point?" Zorro gestured to a massive console at the center of the room, its display flickering intermittently. "Right here, the central core. We've tried every method to reset it, but it refuses to respond. We need someone who can unplug it, so to speak." John eyed the console warily. Unplug it. He wasn't sure what the ambassador meant by that, but the more he looked at the mess of wires and interfaces, the clearer it became. "Looks like you're trying to kickstart a star with a broken battery. Nothing I can't handle." He stepped forward, kneeling by the console. His fingers danced over the controls, pulling up schematics on the flickering display. This was no simple fix. The forge wasn't just a piece of technology. It was an entire ecosystem, a labyrinth of interconnected systems that all fed into one another. If he wasn't careful, he could make things worse. Zorro, who had been watching him, cleared his throat. "Is it possible to repair?" John didn't look up. "It's always possible to repair, just a matter of how bad it's screwed up." The hum of the forge seemed to grow louder, and for a brief moment, John felt as though the structure itself was watching him, testing him. But that didn't matter. He grabbed his wrench from his belt and turned back to the console. "Let's see if this old girl still remembers what it's like to be useful," John muttered under his breath as he began to pry open a compartment and reconnect the first power relay. John's fingers worked quickly, the familiar hum of his wrench in his hands grounding him in a world of chaos. He twisted and turned, pried and pulled at connections, his mind calculating the best way to bypass the forge's damaged systems. He didn't need any fancy tech to do this, just the basics: wires, power relays, and a bit of mechanical know-how. But the forge didn't make things easy. A loud, shrieking noise echoed through the chamber. John paused, his wrench hovering in midair. The hum of the forge deepened, vibrating the floor beneath his feet. He looked up, his eyes scanning the darkened room. Then, out of nowhere, a series of bright red lights flashed across the walls. "Damn it," John muttered under his breath. A cold, robotic voice filled the room, its tone flat and mechanical. "Unauthorized access detected. Security protocols initiating." Before John could react, the floor beneath him shifted. A section of it opened up, revealing a hulking drone, its glowing red eyes fixed directly on him. The drone's body was a hulking mass of metal and weapons, its limbs designed for both precision and brute force. It locked into position, scanning John with an eerie calm. "Great," John muttered, as he dropped his wrench and grabbed his fusion welder. "Just what I needed." The drone's metallic feet clanged against the floor as it advanced. John sidestepped, narrowly avoiding its first strike, but it was already too close. The drone's mechanical arm swung toward him with terrifying speed, the sound of servos whirring. John rolled under the arm and came up on the other side, just in time to grab his wrench. "You really don't know who you're dealing with," he said, grinning to himself. He darted forward, using the momentum of the drone's swing against it. With a quick, practiced motion, John swung his wrench, jamming it into a gap in the drone's plating. Sparks flew as the wrench scraped against the inner workings of the machine. The drone halted, letting out a loud screech, its systems faltering for a brief moment. John didn't wait for it to recover. He dove for the fusion welder, activating the weapon with a quick flick of the wrist. Blue-hot energy shot out, searing through the drone's side. The drone jerked violently, thrashing as its systems fought to stay online. For a brief moment, John thought he'd won. But then, the machine's voice returned, louder and more insistent. "Unauthorized access detected. Security protocols." John cut it off by smashing his wrench into the drone's central processor. The machine crumpled to the floor, its glowing red eyes dimming as it powered down. John stood over it, panting, a slight sheen of sweat on his forehead. That's one problem down. He wiped his hands on his pants, the adrenaline still coursing through him. The forge had just made its first move, but John wasn't about to let it take him down that easily. He turned back to the console, his focus unshaken. "You really want to play games, huh?" he said under his breath. "Fine. Let's see what else you've got." A low rumble vibrated through the forge, and John could feel the temperature rise. More security measures were coming, he was sure of it. But he was ready. One problem at a time, he thought. One wrench at a time. And if the forge wanted a fight, John Rice was more than willing to give it one. John's fingers danced over the next relay panel, his eyes fixed on the screen in front of him. The forge was fighting him, its security systems trying to push him out, but every time they struck, John struck back harder. He wasn't some faceless engineer who followed instructions. He was the last kind of person you'd want to face in a system fight, a mechanic with a grudge and a very old wrench. Another drone slid out from the walls, its limbs clicking in time with the forge's low hum. John didn't flinch. He knew what was coming. This one was larger than the last, more heavily armored. Its guns were mounted on both sides, and its movements were precise, methodical. "Can't say I didn't expect this," John muttered, stepping away from the panel and reaching for his fusion welder. This time, John didn't wait for the drone to make its first move. He darted under its sweeping arms, moving with a grace that belied his rough appearance. The drone fired, but the shots went wide, scorching the walls behind him. John wasn't looking to destroy it. Not yet, anyway. He skidded behind the drone, flipping a switch on the welder. The plasma cutter's tip lit up, glowing bright and hot. With a quick jab, he sliced through one of the drone's back panels, exposing its power core. The drone let out a mechanical screech as sparks exploded from the wound, but it didn't stop. It rotated, its weapons locking onto John, and its foot slammed down hard, cracking the ground beneath him. John rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast, and came up with a wild grin on his face. "You're going to need more than that," he taunted. The drone closed in again, faster this time, its movements almost like a machine learning from every mistake. John barely had time to react as the drone's other arm swung toward him. He raised his welder in defense, blocking the strike just in time. But this wasn't a fair fight. John knew it. With a sharp twist, he slipped past the drone and dove under its body, cutting through exposed cables and wires with ruthless efficiency. It tried to turn on him, but John's hands were already inside its circuits, yanking power relays free and causing the drone to spasm. The forge's pulse grew more erratic, its defenses shifting and recalibrating as John worked. He could hear the mechanical voice in the background, its words a monotone warning that was quickly losing its edge. "Security breach. Systems malfunctioning." Yeah, I get it," John muttered, frustration growing. The last drone had barely given him the time to catch his breath, and now this one was just another obstacle. But he could see the edge of the forge's control core. He was getting closer. With a final twist, John yanked the main power conduit from the drone's body, and it collapsed in a heap of smoke and sparks. The system went quiet for a moment. Too quiet. John wiped the sweat from his brow. "All right, I've had enough fun for one day. Time to get to the heart of the problem." He turned back to the console, his fingers tracing the controls. The screen flickered, then went dark. The forge was reacting. It was adapting. But so was John. He grinned again, the taste of victory sharp in his mouth. This was where the real work started. And if the forge thought it had him beaten, it was in for a rude awakening. The forge's heart pulsed before John, a massive crystalline core, suspended in a cavernous chamber. It was more magnificent than he'd imagined, siphoning energy like a star, glowing a bright blue that seemed to radiate with ancient power. John could feel the heat from it even at a distance, a steady wave that thrummed through the air and into his bones. But the beauty of the core only masked the danger. The forge had thrown everything it had at him so far: drones, automated defenses, and even the floor itself. But now he was here, staring at the core that controlled the entire machine. If he could fix this, the whole galaxy might have a chance. If not, well, John didn't think that far ahead. Not yet. He wasn't done. The walls around him were alive with the buzz of machinery, but the air felt still, tense, as though the forge was waiting, watching him. He reached into his bag, pulling out a small device, a jury-rigged diagnostic scanner he'd built years ago. He hadn't had much use for it lately. Just a few repairs here and there, but now it was going to be the key. He placed the scanner on the floor, watching it wire and beep, collecting data from the core. The device's holographic display flickered, pulling up complex readings, algorithms, and energy signatures. John didn't flinch. He wasn't intimidated by the display. He wasn't some bureaucratic technocrat who needed a team of scientists to explain every detail. John Reyes had built this kind of thing before. The core was a puzzle, and John was really good at puzzles. As he worked, the forge seemed to react to his presence. The ambient hum grew louder, almost as though it were a warning, an internal alarm clanging in the depths of its systems. A high-pitched whine began to pulse through the walls, an ominous sound that told John he didn't have much time before something big went wrong. He squatted before the core, eyeing the complicated wiring that spiraled around its base. There were too many moving parts, and the core was maintaining an active self-repair function. But it was all connected. Every wire, every energy relay, every communication link. If John could disrupt its internal feedback loop, he could initiate a hard reset and possibly get the system back online. With a sharp intake of breath, John raised his wrench. This wasn't just a simple repair anymore. He wasn't fixing a busted engine or a broken ship. He was about to mess with something far more powerful, something that could either save the galaxy or tear it apart. As his hand hovered over the exposed connections, the chamber trembled again, and a voice, robotic, cold, emotionless, spoke from the forge's depths. Warning: core breach imminent. Unauthorized access detected. Defensive measures activating. John's eyes narrowed. Well, that's not exactly subtle, he muttered. A few sparks flickered in the air, and the entire core flared brighter, shifting with violent energy. But John didn't back away. His grip on the wrench tightened. You don't get to stop me now. He lunged forward, jamming the wrench into the core's exposed interface, and twisted hard. Sparks erupted, the air crackled with tension, and the hum of the forge surged to a deafening crescendo. Come on, baby, John grunted, his muscles straining. He had no idea what would happen next. But one thing was for sure: the forge wasn't going to go down quietly. The core pulsed violently, a cascade of energy shooting out from the junction where John had wedged his wrench. Sparks flew, and the entire chamber rumbled, as if the forge itself were screaming in agony. John's heart pounded in his chest, his grip white-knuckled on the wrench, his muscles burning from the strain. The forge wasn't giving up easily. The alarms blared, louder now, as the automated defense systems went into overdrive. The walls shuddered, and more drones emerged from hidden compartments. They were faster, smarter. John could hear their servos clicking, their weapons primed for another attack. The forge wasn't just fighting back anymore. It was fighting to survive. But John wasn't about to let that happen. Not today, he muttered to himself, his eyes focused solely on the core in front of him. The energy crackling around the chamber intensified, and the temperature spiked, sweat pouring down John's face. He could feel the power surging through the forge like a living thing, an ancient and stubborn creature that refused to die. His wrench, already starting to heat up from the extreme energy discharge, was starting to warp, but John didn't care. With a primal grunt, he twisted harder, his muscles screaming in protest. The chamber's lights flickered, dimming with the stress of the core's instability. The entire system was on the brink of collapse. John could feel it. If he didn't succeed in the next few moments, it wouldn't just be the forge that fell. It would be the entire galaxy as its fragile lifeblood of trade and supply lines disintegrated with it. The drones advanced, but John wasn't looking at them. He didn't need to. He could feel their presence like a buzz in his skin, but his focus was on one thing: the feedback loop he was trying to break. The console in front of him sparked, then whined. A burst of static filled the air as the forge's control system struggled to recalibrate. John's breath came in short gasps as he fought to keep the wrench locked into place, forcing the internal reset mechanism to engage. Then, with a sound like 1,000 gears grinding, everything shifted. The core's violent glow faded into a calm, steady pulse. The rumbling stopped. The chamber grew quiet, eerily so. John, still kneeling by the core, let out a long exhale. His hands were shaking, his body exhausted, but a grin tugged at his lips. He had done it. Against all odds, against everything the forge had thrown at him, he had reset it. The drones, now immobilized, fell to the ground with dull thuds. The wall's alarm systems ceased, and the core's hum became softer, more controlled. John's eyes fluttered closed for a moment as the adrenaline drained from his system. He stood up slowly, wiping the sweat from his forehead. His wrench had nearly melted in his hands, but it had done its job. And now, the galaxy had a fighting chance. Behind him, Zero appeared from the shadows of the chamber. His face was a mix of disbelief and awe. You did it," he said, voice low, almost reverent. John turned to face him, still breathing heavily but with a smirk. "Yeah, I guess I did. You're welcome." Zoro blinked, clearly unsure how to respond. "But how? The forge is ancient. It's beyond anything we can." John cut him off with a shrug. "It's not about what you can do. It's about what a human with a wrench can do when everything else falls apart." Zoro opened his mouth to speak but paused. There were no words for what John had just accomplished. Not just a mechanical feat, but a symbolic one. A reminder that sometimes it wasn't the machines that decided the fate of the galaxy. John slung his wrench over his shoulder and looked at the now stable core, the soft glow of the energy at its center. "I'm done here," he said. "But if you need more help, I'm sure there's a planet or two that could use a good fix." Zoro nodded, finally understanding. "We'll be in touch." John didn't wait for any more thanks. He had done his part. As he walked out of the chamber, he could already feel the hum of the forge calming into something more predictable, something manageable. The job was done, and the galaxy, for now, was safe. As the door closed behind him, John couldn't help but grin to himself. Maybe, just maybe, the galaxy's last hope had a future after all.